welcome back to the channel. I am the Darklight Emissary. In this episode, we go from the oldest known faction in the setting last time, the Necrons, to now the youngest faction, the Tau Empire. This one will, probably without a doubt, be a little bit shorter than some others, just because the Tau are really cool, but there simply isn't the history on them compared to a lot of the other factions we have covered so far. But what there is here is really good, and I like the idea of the Tau a lot in the setting. The first main point to convey is just how young they really are as a species. They were first discovered by a Mechanicus expeditionary fleet around 6,000 years before the current 41st millennia. And when they were first observed, they were only mastering the wheel and fire. Basically, they were still in the Stone Age. It was slated to purge them from their world and colonize it, but due to the age of apostasy just beginning in the Imperium of mankind, the fleet's plans weren't able to come to fruition, leaving the Tau to develop on their own. Eventually, the Tau were fighting each other in some vicious wars over resources and politics for a time, much like any society would be, and without real deeper explanation, two Tau arrived to each of the warring factions, and after entering in and speaking with each faction's leaders, both sides are willing to negotiate. This is the true beginning of the Tau as an empire, and these two leaders were part of a caste known as the Ethereal caste. With the guidance of the Ethereals, who may or may not have had higher technology to impart onto the rest of the species, that's my speculation, it's unsure exactly how the Ethereals came to be, the species united, and through rapid innovation from then onwards, they eventually became a spacefaring species. However, it is important to note the Tau are not a psychic species at all, as far as we know. They do have a presence in the warp, but it is noted that to demons or other psychic types, their souls appear like wisps, ethereal and incomplete, compared to the fiery presence of a baseline human soul, as an example. The Tau do not really understand what the warp is, and while they utilize the warp for their space travels, they only skip lightly across its surface, incapable of delving to its depths without dedicated navigators like the Imperium, or a bypass like the Aldari Webway. The Tau are uniquely split up into a caste system. Members of each caste are dedicated for life to specific roles within society, and there is no interbreeding between the castes as to also specialize the biology of the different castes into their roles. At the top as leaders are the Ethereal caste. These lead the Tau, and it's not quite understood if it's some sort of latent passive psyker ability, or a pheromone, or what makes their people follow the Ethereals unquestioningly. Although it is noted if an Ethereal demands a loyal subject to kill themselves, they will do it without question. It is also noteworthy that if a member of this caste is not present, members of the Tau will come out of their feeling of unity, and sometimes reject the greater good as the main governing and philosophy is known as. And we will talk briefly of one such event later on. The next caste is the Fire caste. This caste are the warriors or military of the Tau. They are the most physically large of them. They specialize in war and protection of the species. The next is the Water caste. This caste delves into the mechanisms of society. They are the civil servants, diplomats, administrators, and other essential roles in society keeping its functioning. There is next the Air caste, who are, without really elaborating, the pilots and space navy specialists of the Tau. The most numerous caste is the Earth caste, who do all of the manual labor work of society, and their smartest becoming the doctors and scientists and other necessary parts of, creating the functioning Tau Empire. One of the greatest traits of the Tau Empire is that they are a non-xenophobic society. In their explorations of their local part of the galaxy in the east, they have come across multiple other species, and as long as they learn how to communicate with that species, they will extend an invitation to join the Tau Empire. A few of the species that have joined the Tau are the Kroot, who are a mostly pre-industrial species of tribal warriors. They are savage and have become the Tau's melee and more shock troop specialists. Notably, one of the most interesting traits of the Kroot are they will take on physical traits or even cultural traits of a species they devour. So some of them have devolved, some of them have evolved into bigger forms. I remember in the Dawn of War Dark Crusade campaign, if you play as the Tau and defeat the forces of chaos, it's noted some Tau or some Kroot ate chaos sainted flesh and had to be hunted down by the Tau and brought down because they were mutating and becoming chaos corrupted themselves. And another species they have brought into the fold are the Vespid, which are a insectoid type species with diamond hard claws, and are used as kind of a melee type shock troop as well, but they also have some ranged weaponry. The Vespid seem to partially be a hive society, and it was at first really hard to communicate with them. The Vespid didn't even recognize the Tau as sentient, and eventually the Tau were able to communicate with a special technology they developed just to communicate with the Vespid. There are a few other species also a part of the Tau, but there's not much written or I've ever heard on these. Suffice to say, they invite any species that is generally intelligent and willing to negotiate to join their empire. It is important to, on that note, mention that the Tau have also extended this invitation to colonies of humans, and some humans have definitely decided to join the greater good over staying in the Imperium of Man. These are known as Guevesa. The Tau refuse to negotiate with the Orcs for obvious reasons, because the Orcs are Orcs, and they also have found an incapability to negotiating with any forces of chaos they have come across for similarly obvious reasons. The Tau are both greatly disturbed by and also deeply confused by the corruption of the Warp and its chaos forces, I would imagine, when first running into them, especially. I imagine a Tau Ethereal or Water Caste member, once tried to communicate with a Chaos Warband, and they just got back a video feed of a half-crazed Chaos Marine wearing the face of one of their diplomats or something similarly insane, thus helping impress upon them the realization they were dealing with older and scarier forces in the galaxy they were previously were unaware of. Part of this was also the Imperium itself. Eventually, the Imperium took notice again against the Tau. They saw that the Tau had established more colonies, was now spacefaring, and was even trading with some of the frontier parts of the Imperial colonies on the eastern side of the Imperium. The Imperium, being that old, terrible, bitter empire that it is, set forth to organize a crusade to go push back the Tau at the least, or utterly exterminate them at the most. Negotiation with xenos was not to be tolerated. This was known as the Damocles Crusade, and it consisted of many regiments of Astra Militarum, or baseline human Imperial troops, even some Titans, and around 500 Space Marines. The Tau were not prepared at first for the complete viciousness of this ancient empire, and the Crusade punched in hard at first. Eventually, the Tau were able to organize a greater defense, and they were even able to push back against such dread machines like the Titans, with a combination of their ranged and technological might and the resourcefulness of the Kroot tactics in combination. Curiously, members of the Imperial Inquisition present wanted to use Exterminatus on a Tau world at one point, and of all the forces present, the leaders of the Space Marines were the ones that opposed such action, viewing the Tau fighting spirit as honorable. They thought it was kind of disrespectful to do that to the Tau. I can only imagine finding an intelligent species like the Tau, who aren't just vicious, bloodthirsty monsters or chaos corrupted or whatever else nightmare Space Marines face. Kind of came as a breath of fresh air in some regards. Your enemy seems to respect you in combat, like a kind of an old time fashion. So maybe that's part of why. The Crusade became permanently bogged down, and what finally finished it was the arrival of the Great Devourer into the galaxy. The Tyranid Hive Fleet Kraken was cutting into the Imperium, and all Imperial forces were pulled back to deal with this great threat. The Tau Water Caste diplomats confirmed with leaders of the Crusade they would be unmolested in their retreat back to the Imperial space, which was honored. Eventually, a portion of Hive Fleet Behemoth, known as Gorgon, arrived in Tau space and started consuming worlds in it. The Tau fought hard against these enemies, but found that the Tyranids could adapt their biological forms to be outright immune to some of their weapon systems. Due to the sheer threat, to all life, the Tyranid represent forces of the Imperium, and Tau formed a great unified defense for a time against the Tyranids. Despite losing several worlds, they were able to eventually defeat and stave off the Tyranid splinter fleets, threatening to consume them. One of the only times I have read about the Tau in the books, me personally, was during the book Nightbringer in the Ultramarines Omnibus. The Tau were looking to take over an Imperial world they felt would make a great addition for resources and, new subjects. The Ultramarines, along with other Imperial forces, defended the world, and the captain of the Ultramarines present, Uriel Ventress, realized a particular way to defeat the Tau. It is noted in this book that the Tau were pretty tough to defeat directly. Despite the Imperium's sheer age and formidable combat spirit, the Tau can augment their weakness in numbers, their high technological advancements, some of which eclipse and overcome Imperial stagnation by a large degree. However, since the Tau conquer mostly out of resource gain and interest in a world, Uriel ordered that key infrastructure be destroyed on purpose on the world, like bridges and other main reasons the Tau were found to want the world itself. Eventually, the Tau stopped fighting, and one of their fire caste leaders spoke with Uriel and basically said, "You would rather see this world burned around you than cede it to us, wouldn't you?" Uriel gave a irrevocable, shameless yes to this, and the Tau decided to retreat, rather than test further resolve, despite their own face, that the Imperium forces were already showing to be willing to do. Tau specializations mostly focus on very ranged combat. They do not really have a ton of melee specialization roles, and they often will choose to fight you from very long range, where and when possible. They also make use of a large variety of mechanized power suits. One of the most iconic are their crisis suits, as they are called, that are highly mobile and can be outfitted in several weapon system configurations. This suit particularly has similar protection to a Space Marine's power armor. Tau weaponry consists of pulse weapons, railguns, ion cannons, and other energy projecting type of weaponry. They also have flamers, things like that. And since they are not opposed to experimentation and adaptation, they're consistently learning more as a species and empire, unlike some of the other stagnating or apex species like the Eldari, who have no need to discover anything anymore. One other important note regarding the Tau, one of their most legendary commanders is known as Commander Farsight. And I haven't really read much on him, but I know fans of the Tau really like him. He was a great leader of the Tau fire caste. And in a campaign against orcs, the commander's forces stumbled upon possibly chaos demons for one of the first major times for the Tau Empire. Commander Farsight found an alien relic sword and a way to shut down the portal, letting the demons onto the world. But found after defeating their foe, his contingent of Ethereal caste members had been killed in the fight to a man. Free of their influence, the commander, who was already a strong-willed commander and hard to control, had full clarity of thought with no influence from the Ethereal caste, and realized for unknown reasons the Ethereal caste may have known about these demons and other threats and said nothing. So he's a bit concerned about that. And both due to his fame and ability, and also because the Ethereals were gone from this force, Farsight founded a new version of the Tau Empire called the Farsight Enclaves, and refuses any contact with the greater Tau Empire. Although sometimes his forces are seen supporting Tau Empire troops, or even in the Empire itself, although not in a hostile manner. The Tau Ethereal caste seems to fear this force, and has noticed that the Enclaves have grown in size over time. It seems like Tau society is doing fine under the watch and stalwart leadership of Farsight. Farsight has now commanded this force for 300 years, which is much longer than a Tau normally lives for. And this is due to the sword he found, which takes life force from his defeated enemies and transfers it to him. Despite having broken with the greater Tau Empire, the Farsight Enclaves have not shown outright hostility towards the rest of the Tau, and many Tau within the Empire view Farsight still in favorable light, like a maverick or trailblazer of some kind. So as of yet, it has not led to any sort of civil war, and it would be interesting to see if it's even possible to have this happen such as the influence of the Ethereal caste members. Just in presence of other Tau, though, I wonder if this could ever happen. I wonder, I guess time will tell. Nothing much seems to be done with the setup yet in any of the books. And then one other important note, it seems that in the 8th edition of the Tau Codex, there is apparently a nascent warp entity the Tau is creating, and it helps save some beleaguered ships of the Tau from destruction, curiously enough. I just found this interesting because the Tau are known mostly as a somewhat atheistic society, and while they are spiritual, they tend to not really be religious. Overall, if I was in the 40k universe, the Tau are at the top of my list for a favorable empire to live in. You would have a specific role to fill, but I would imagine any of those roles are superior to most in the Imperium of Man by comparison, and the Tau do not view their citizens as cannon fodder. And despite being a caste system, they seem to provide for their individual populace's needs. I also love their high-tech style. They are the one true hope for a brighter sci-fi future in the setting. That being said, they are a tiny empire, and if the Imperium or any other more ancient, hateful species in the galaxy ever bent their full focus on eradicating the Tau, I do not see them being able to hold on ultimately in their current state. One can hope, though, even in the grim dark of this setting, for these standouts over the rest of the more death-obsessed species. Right now, the Tau have to hold on against the Tyranids, and probably need to basically remain unnoticed until they hit a certain technological level to really hit hard above their weight against a force that has endless troops, like the Imperium. They operate much like most modern-day First World country militaries do, where they generally provide for their soldiers, and their soldiers don't just get used up in a cannon fodder or, useless tactics setting. While not all Imperial forces do this, none of the Tau forces do this. And I imagine in some of the fights against the Imperium, the Tau are surprised and disheartened by the fanatical sacrifice soldiers of the Imperium are capable of, instead of, say, retreating to regroup or using other more common sense tactics a more modernized military, not stuck on dogma or fanaticism, is capable of. The Tau are much like the humans in other sci-fi settings. They are the younger underdog species with a lot of heart and a more idealistic outlook. And this has been a bit about the Tau Empire. I really do like the Tau. I need to try and find more books on them, but over the years it hasn't really been that much content I've heard of. And the ones that are out there, I've heard of varying degrees of good out of them. I can again recommend the game Dawn of War, Dark Crusade, and Soulstorm if you want to play as a Tau in a game setting and see their forces in action. They're also in Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2, although I've never really messed with their fleet on that to see really their naval capacity. They don't really seem to have a really powerful navy style combat. Thanks again for spending some time on this video, and as always, please like and subscribe for more content. I may do the Grey Knights next chapter of Space Marines, but please leave a comment with a request if you'd like, or to discuss the topic today. Bring your light into the dark places, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you, and have a great day or night, wherever you are.